think that Rainbow was like a great example of how I was kind of being influenced by this idea of like things my kids needed or things I need to be or who I needed to be for my kids. And at this point, I've been working with families for years and years and years, and it still got me.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, and no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey, it's Danielle. On today's episode, I am interviewing Bryce Reddy, who is better known as @mombrain.therapist on Instagram. I have followed her forever, so it's a total fangirl moment for me. But she is so transparent and ready to share her story, her learnings, her platforms, all the things. She's a licensed mental health counselor specializing in motherhood and parenting, and is a mom of 3 living in New England. She supports moms and families on social media, for the most part on her platform @mombrain.therapist, but she also has resources on Etsy. She runs challenges periodically, and she's just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to motherhood, mom rage, social media addiction, postpartum depression, anxiety, all the things. So we cover a lot in this interview. We get to chat about social media as a whole and Instagram and the behind the scenes view that she gets to have doing her weekend polls, which she talks a lot about, and how that gives us a window into other people's lives and how we just kind of get to feel out what normal is and have resources for our insecurity. We also talk about social media in the ways that it affects her parenting, and she tells a story about losing her patience while using her phone to load something on Instagram when her kid needed her attention, and how that was a wake-up call for her to develop a way to reduce her dependency and her relationship with her screen and reduce her screen time by like 77%. And so she's going to be running another one of those challenges really soon. And I have all the information for that in the show notes. She also shares her journey of infertility, both with her first and her second, and just the challenge that was on her mental health, the ways that she gives us permission to unfollow and be able to find our true values and our confidence in knowing what is for us by navigating that relationship of how we feel, clicking onto and clicking off of social media. And you have full permission to unfollow me on Instagram if that is what you need to do, because I really do want you to be thriving and having a really good relationship with the resources that you have in your pocket. She also shares a little bit about her unplanned pregnancy at 38 and her third baby, who is their mystery guest, and just really shares behind the scenes of what it's like to be a part of so many families' lives in this strange time that we're all trying to figure out and how to live on a public platform. And so I just really hope that you can go follow her on Instagram, take part in the weekend polls so that you can feel a part of an even bigger community, as well as taking advantage of maybe her Over the Influence challenge coming up soon for the summer so that you can really feel good about your relationship with your phone. All right, let's dive in to this episode with Bryce. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Bryce Reddy, aka Mom Brain Therapist on Instagram. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. And this is one of those like weird parasocial relationships because I feel like I've known you for a while. You were one of the very first accounts that I found on Instagram, actually, that was like a mom related account. I kind of missed the boat. I was one of those that like stayed on Facebook a lot longer and wasn't really on Instagram until a couple years into motherhood. So finding yours was definitely refreshing and kind of opened me up to the world. I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily that I didn't follow a whole ton of accounts right off the bat, but I really have followed you for a while. And so I would love for you to be able to share with my listeners kind of who you are and what you do and who's in your family.
All right. So my name is Bryce, and like you mentioned, I am a licensed mental health counselor based out of New England, the Massachusetts area. And I am a mom of 3. I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 6-month-old who kind of just joined the party recently and was a great surprise into our lives. And we are just living our lives, balancing it all as much as possible and doing the best we can.
I love that. Yeah, I've kind of followed that journey with your third a little bit, from a ways away. And so how long have you had your account?
So I think I started in 2019, I want to say. So I was on about a year before the whole like pandemic situation kind of blew up social media. Mm-hmm. And I started basically as I think more of like a postpartum account. Like that was what I was focusing on when I first got on there. And as I think anyone that goes onto social media, or at least most people know that are like starting these types of like helper accounts, it takes a little bit of time to kind of like find your way and to find out like what you want to talk about and like what's like kind of resonating with you and what's resonating with your audience and finding your particular voice. And so since that time, I've kind of evolved past that postpartum stage and more into kind of just like everyday motherhood and mental health. And that's kind of the place I'm at right now.
Yeah. And you only have like 230,000 followers.
Yeah.
It's not like it's any.
It's such a surreal thing, It's one of those things where you just kind of start one day and you start posting things and you start making like, graphics or whatever. And then all of a sudden you look down and you're like, oh, wow, like there is like people resonating with this. And it's a very interesting place to be.
Yeah. And so I wanted to ask you all about your story, but let's just talk about social media while we're on the topic for a minute, because where do you feel like that relatability really came in? Like, what about your content do you feel like was different or new or refreshing, or like, how did you grow so fast?
I don't always kind of know the answer to this actually, but one of the biggest things I think that is the gift of being a therapist is that, I've been a therapist for, 15, 16 years at this point. And one of the biggest gifts of this job, I think, is recognizing that the common thread of humanity, right? That I can sit in a room with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and now thousands of people on Instagram. And our stories, while the details are different, there is so much that we all have in common about kind of the ups and downs of life. And there is really very little unique about any one of us. And I think kind of allowing people to see that there is this common thread amongst us all, especially in motherhood and parenting, that people really resonate with that. They resonate with this feeling of like, oh, I'm not alone, or this like, I think I'm so weird, quote unquote weird or different than other people. And then recognizing that, thousands of other people are experiencing something similar to you. Mm-hmm. People are drawn to that. They find comfort in that.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because we might not be having those conversations with our moms, our friends in real life. Mm-hmm. We don't have that village that we really do want to feel like we need, because we need that true validation. We need to know we're not alone.
And I think even when we do have the village, there's just stuff that we don't talk about socially, right? Mm-hmm. That there is this kind of hidden stuff. Maybe you have like 1 or 2 people in your life, if that you can ask those kind of like very intimate questions to. But I find that people will reach out to me and be like, can you ask like your audience this? And sometimes it's really basic stuff, stuff that you would never really think to like people were wondering about, but stuff that people are walking around being like, is this how other people do it? Is this, what do you think? And there is this real kind of, I guess like urge or desire to kind of hear from the people around us what's really inside of them.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like you get a really unique behind the scenes lens with those weekend polls because they are kind of quote unquote anonymously asked. So, moms feel more comfortable to ask something that they might not ask their best friend because there is that like anonymity involved. So what has that experience been like for you to get to read all the submissions each week?
Yeah, so we get a lot. About like 50,000 people go through the polls, sometimes on the weekends, depending on kind of like the time of year and if there's holidays and things like that. But I think, going back to what I said before about the common thread of humanity is that I get like hundreds of the same questions, over and over again. And every weekend there's so many similar questions. And I try and pick like unique ones each weekend. But, there is that constant reminder, that message that I'm getting from kind of the work I do offline and online is that there is so much amongst us that is similar. We're more alike than different, and we're all wondering the same things. We're all struggling with similar things. And there is that lesson again and again that keeps coming back to me about our similarities.
I should have prefaced for those that don't already follow you.
Oh, sure.
What are we talking about?
So on the weekends, I do, for the past, I think over 2 years now, I've been doing it every Saturday and Sunday. And I set up a question box basically in my Instagram stories, and people can submit a yes, no, either or question for the group at large to answer. And within that, little Instagram story, there's a poll and people can click like yes or no, or, sometimes they're more specific, like, variations of yes or no. And people respond, and we get kind of this, just a bunch of submissions in terms of like what other people are doing. And it comes out with like percentages, like this many people said yes, or 67% say they do wash their hair, 3 times a week. Sometimes they're very benign questions like that. And then I also have a discussion group that I started where people can go and share resources and share ideas or discuss or ask questions that are related to the polls. And people do this, it's not anonymously, but it is a private group. So you have to be in the group to actually see kind of what people are writing. So it's kind of created kind of a little bit of an event around the weekend that people kind of tune into, and they can do while they're up feeding their babies late at night, or they can do after they put their kids to bed, or, when they just need kind of like a little bit of a mental break.
Yeah, that's definitely part of my weekend routine.
Me too, right? And I think a lot of people write me all the time that they do it with their partners, or they, that it's just something they do that's kind of just for them, and they can go. And I think there's also like something that feels good about sharing your information and your knowledge, like in the discussion group, people sharing ideas that have worked for them, or sharing accounts that have worked for them, or websites, that there's so many opportunities to kind of come together and share experiences and information.
So what are some of those questions that you get all the time?
People want to know a lot about like sex stuff, right? Like they want to know like how much people are having, like, that sort of thing. And tons of how much partners are helping with a household, like division of labor type stuff. So that sort of thing is something we hear about all the time. Does your husband do this? Does your partner do this? And also kind of lots of people, I want to say like questioning their relationships in some ways, like feeling like, I don't know if this is like a good fit for me, and kind of something that they're really struggling with and feeling very alone with. And so they put those questions out, and you usually do see that there is other people feeling alone and isolated in either a decision or a feeling that you're having as well. So I'd say those are the top ones, like kind of lots of relationship stuff comes up, and also lots of, where is it, like, is my kid normal, basically, like it all kind of goes back to this idea, like my kid does this, does your kid do this? Like, that does this kind of on the range of normal? Like I'm not sure about it. And so kind of looking for, some validation in that way as well.
Yeah. Because when you don't have a basis of quote unquote like normal, or what to expect in a marriage, what to expect in, your kid's development. Yeah, you're just kind of aimless.
Yeah, it is, and even when you kind of do, there's this kind of feeling, I have 3 kids, and I think I always go back and I'm like, they're three completely different humans. Like, I'm always baffled at how I've like produced this many, three children that are so vastly different and have such varied needs and like ways that they move through the world. And, even I find myself like Googling, I'm like, like, how do I feel about this? Like, is this what they did? I don't remember,
Yeah.
So, we're always, that's the nature, I think, of, parenthood and motherhood in a lot of ways, is this kind of level of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And when sometimes all we need to know to like curb that anxiety is like someone else out there has a kid just like mine.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
It's getting comfortable within the uncertainty, I think, is the biggest challenge of parenthood in a lot of ways, is that there is, so much uncertainty and something that we haven't necessarily had much experience with in our lives prior to parenthood. Because, prior to parenthood, we're like, I can apply for this, job, or I can do my job and I'm good at my job, or I can go to college and I can, be good at school because if I do X, X, and X, I'll graduate, whereas like you get a kid and like there is no roadmap and you're like, I can do X, X, and X, and like he or she could still be who knows what could happen, right? They could still get sick. They could still get hurt. They could still, anything.
Yeah. It's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it is. When you really think about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why we are like late at night Googling things and panicking.
Right. And here we are.
Right. So if there's like one message that you would just like want every one of your followers and my listeners to hear, what is like that thing that's like always on your heart to like either reassure moms or just like what do you feel like they need to hear?
I always just think like you're doing better than you think you are. I think it's so easy to be so hard on yourself and to question yourself and every decision that you make. And when it all really comes down to it, I think that, people are doing better than they think they are. And myself included and you and everyone. And, if we can just step back from, I don't want to say this close, not severe, but like just this intense scrutiny that we put on ourselves to be the best or to do wonderful things or to give our children everything we hope to give them, that whatever we're doing today is probably pretty good, and pretty good is pretty good. You can't do much better. So you just do our best every day. Yeah.
It's so simple, but like pretty profound when you really let it sink in.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. So that's a perfect transition back to, I totally jumped the gun. I usually would ask you right off the bat to clarify whether or not you joined the club. Have you ever felt like you were failing motherhood?
I have, yeah. Haven't we all, right? But
yes,
I think I'm pretty easy on myself in a lot of ways, just because like I've been through stuff in my life that has, reminded me to not take everything so seriously. But there's few times in my life that kind of stick out the most. And one is something which was like, ironically, completely out of my control, which is infertility, which is something I went through with my first and second child. I did IVF. I've experienced losses. And one thing I really struggled with a lot, especially with secondary infertility, is wanting to give my child a sibling, and it just wasn't happening. And I saw it happening all around me. Of course, my son was 2 when I was going through IVF for my second child. And of course, as a lot of people know, like that age 2 preschool time is when like all you see is like pregnant people all around you, because everyone's getting a new brother or sister. So it seems. And so we kind of convince ourselves that that's what everyone else is doing. Yeah. And I feel like that was a big time in my life where I felt a lot of failure because I was super depressed. I was really struggling with like depression and anxiety. I was like totally obsessed with, making this happen. And I felt, while I had that tunnel vision on like creating a human, but I also, was feeling very much like I wasn't 100% present for my first child. And so I was constantly going through this kind of back and forth of, of feeling like a failure, like, oh, I'm really trying to do this because I feel like a failure that I can't give him a sibling, but I also feel like a failure because I'm like totally distracted and obsessed with this other thing in my life. So it was kind of just this real back and forth time that I still kind of can look back on and feel that sense of like, oh, that was like so rough.
Like guilt on all sides.
Yeah, definitely.
So have you been able to give yourself compassion for that, process that? What does that look like now that you're on the other side?
I think it's just, I like to remind myself that life is more than kind of those little moments. And I don't mean little moments like as in they're not important. I mean like these brief moments of time. And I try and look at life as a whole and, and try not to get that tunnel vision on like certain spaces of my life because I'm not going to be perfect or, my children's lives aren't going to be perfect for, little blips along the way. And that's just life. So whenever I do have those moments of like zeroing in and be like, oh, that was so like, that was really a rough time. I zoom out and I just try and be like, you know what? Like the bigger picture here is that like he always knew he was loved. He was always safe. And, I had, as a human, I'm going to be working through stuff occasionally in life, just like, my oldest child is going to be working through stuff in his life. And there's always going to be these like ups and downs. And that was just one of our particular ups and downs, and that's just my constant reminder anytime we go through rough periods as individuals or families or even my children is that these are the expected ups and downs of life, that we're and learning to get through them and letting our children see us work through them, whether they're 2 years old or 16 years old, there's something being modeled there about modeling resiliency and perseverance and getting yourself out of tough spots.
Yeah, which is so beautiful. It's the human experience on display.
It is. Yeah, it is, right? And that's all we can really do. Our children are humans being raised by humans, and we're never going to have a picture perfect example of how to do life because one doesn't exist. And, being through it with our children is part of it.
Yeah, we're growing up right alongside them.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. And I think some of us may have entered parenthood or motherhood with some type of expectation, totally subconsciously, where it's like, all right, now I've arrived and I've reached this like level of enlightenment, and now I'm going to turn around and bestow it to the next generation.
Right.
I'm going to teach all these lessons, and I'm going to like, instill all these values. And then you all of a sudden are faced with this mirror of like, oh no, like I don't know what I'm doing at all.
Yeah. It is. It's a real like awakening process. I had a moment yesterday. I have a 6-month-old and I took him for his 6-month checkup, and, he like, I had to change his diaper when the nurse was like, we were getting him undressed to go get him weighed. And I was like changing him, like, oh my God, I have to change his diaper. And it was this moment of thinking like, I felt totally normal doing that in front of being on display, doing that in front of the nurse and medical assistant who was ready to go take us to get weighed, even though we were like, kind of backing things up. I had to take all his clothes off and he was a mess and all these things. And then I had this moment where I thought, and I was like, oh my God, I can only imagine having done this with my oldest child. I would have been mortified, like bright red face. Like, of course I was dealing with some postpartum mental health issues as well, but like that there's this big difference, like what a difference 8 years and 3 kids can make of kind of allowing yourself to kind of do what you have to do and realize that not everyone's judging you and that you're just being is okay. And it was this kind of funny moment, full circle moment for me, because I feel like I probably had a similar moment with my oldest child, and I did not feel confident at all, and just something silly like changing a diaper in front of somebody else. But, those things are, little moments that I think help us.
Yeah. And if you are that first-time parent right now, you're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah. And no one thinks you are, like that she was just waiting for me. Like she wasn't like critiquing how I put a diaper on or how I cleaned him or anything like that. And she wasn't doing, if this was a similar nurse, wasn't doing it 8 years ago either. They're just like saying, oh,
right.
Here she is. She's changing a diaper. Yeah. But it's our own internal dialogue and our own internal insecurities that we feel, that create that internal reaction that we have, right?
Yeah.
I'm in a place now where I can, my story isn't she's watching me, she's, I'm holding her up, like, am I doing this right? My story is, you need a diaper change. Like, and more focused on my baby as opposed to kind of the world around me. But, I think that's impacted by how I'm feeling as a person and my mental health at this point in my life and kind of different experiences I've had along the way. So it's hard to change that internal dialogue. But I think the best thing we can do is to recognize that internal dialogue and say, what stories am I telling myself about this situation?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. Is there a way to speed up this process? Like, can we get to be a veteran parent, quicker?
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that the biggest thing I always recommend to people is being aware of those thoughts that are coming through your brain. What story are you telling yourself about this moment? Because those are going to set off those chain reactions with your body. One of the examples I talk about a lot in therapy is if I tell you to imagine a lemon, think of a lemon, imagine cutting the lemon open, you can feel your tongue and your saliva increasing in your mouth just by thinking about a lemon and cutting it open and smelling it and feeling it on your hands. I can do it just talking about it right now. And so that's how powerful our brain is in terms of the mind-body connection, right? So when I'm feeling as a new mom, if I'm sitting there changing the diaper and being am I doing this right? She's looking at me, I didn't bring wipes or I don't have an extra diaper and I had to ask her. She probably thinks I'm a loser. What does that do to our internal state? Then my face starts getting red, then I start panicking and then I start feeling really bad about myself. Whereas if I can just kind of change that internal dialogue and say well, I didn't have a diaper, I didn't have wipes, oh, that was bad. But, oh well, and that's kind of, being aware of the internal dialogue and shifting the internal dialogue. I like to shift it back to my child and what I'm doing to take care of him or her.
So more focusing on narrating the situation you're in or the environment or your child's experience rather than your experience.
And instead of my internal experience. Yeah. So getting myself out of my imagination and the story I'm telling myself about this moment and getting back into the moment and saying oh, look how soft your belly feels right now. And, oh, it's chilly in here. I'm going to bring a blankie with us. Really getting back into those senses. And it doesn't have to be this intense grounding situation. It can just be rubbing your baby's belly and saying, you're so soft, or we're going to go put you in the thing. And, using this moment to get out of what is going on in this brain area and getting back into the moment with your baby, who's always in the moment and always ready there for you to receive whatever you have going. So,
because the inverse is actually what happens if we are so in our head, we aren't present with them. We're not connecting eye to eye. We're not narrating. We're not able to fully be because we're not there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's you could apply that to almost every scenario.
Literally, our whole lives, right? Yeah, everything about our lives, the stories we tell ourselves inside are so varied and they have such an impact on our well-being. And bringing it back to the present moment anytime is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah. If you have a 1 to 7-year-old child that is often melting down or dysregulated, you feel like they're exhibiting a lot of attention-seeking behaviors. They're sensitive, perceptive, observant, smart, and therefore possibly anxious. They do well at school or for others and tend to fall apart at home. You feel like they're controlling with siblings or friends during play, and it feels like you can never fill their cup. If you have a child like this, and you missed my Survive Your Strong-Willed Child free training on Sunday, find me on Instagram, send me a message that says strong-willed, and I will make sure that you get the replay. Because they don't need more punishment. They don't need more consequences. They need security, power reversal, and leverage attention. And when you have the perspective and the insight and the tools, you can decode their personality and transform your relationship. This is what I'm passionate about. This is exactly what I do one-on-one and in the group program. We focus on improving their behavior through the tools of positive discipline, cultivating cooperation, giving them so much more capacity and filling their cup in all of these deeper ways so that we can just eliminate the behaviors that they're using to get those needs met, while also working on your patience and hopefully getting you on the same page as your partner. So if you're ready to be able to take advantage of that free training or have more of a conversation about what it looks like to get support, find me on Instagram at parent_wholeheartedly and send me a message that says strong-willed. But, so is everything else cupcakes, rainbows, butterflies, and, perfection on like, as an influencer? Or what other parts of motherhood do you feel like you're failing in or have felt that way?
I think one of the things, so I had my first child in 2014, and, being in 2014, life was different. Like, there was the bump, and there was, like, Facebook, maybe.
Understatement of the year, probably.
Yeah, life was different, and it's been an interesting experience having a baby in 2014 and a baby in 2021. Like, life just looks different. And I think one of the things when I first started getting into Instagram, like, probably, like, I want to say, like, 2018, 2017, like, that's, like, I think when, with my second child, she was born in 2017, that there is this kind of shift that happened in terms of, like, online experts and, like, people with play ideas or whatever, how to feed your kids, all those things. And I would think that kind of got in my head a little, right? When I first started getting on kind of like the Instagram scene, I was seeing all of this, like, I think recommendations, I guess, or kind of like, people telling you how you should be or how you should be interacting with your kids or things you should be doing with them. And I thought they were really great aspirational ideas, right? Like, they all seemed like good ideas, like colorful rice and sensory things and, fancy bedrooms or playrooms or toys that I need to give my kids, like that rainbow wooden toy, right? That we saw everywhere.
Yes.
I want to say in like 2017. So that was a big thing with my second child. I was like, I need this rainbow. And my husband's like, okay.
It's only like $150.
Yeah, it's like $150 rainbow. But luckily we still play with this rainbow. But like, I think that rainbow was like a great example of how I was kind of being influenced by this idea of like things my kids needed or things I need to be or who I needed to be for my kids. And at this point, I've been working with families for years and years and years, and it still got me. Like, I still felt like a pretty like confident person in terms of like who I was and, the type of person I am and how I move through the world and the type of parent I am, and knowing these variations of normal that exist within the parenting realm, right? But I was still there thinking like, I really need this $150 wooden rainbow to like make my child's life, so I think that was an area I struggled with, feeling like there was shoulds and starting to question who I was as a mom. Like, should I be doing sensory bins? Like, should I have like decorated their room like such and such? Should I be doing more such and such activities? Should I be buying certain things? And that got in my head, and I, started questioning who I was and how I was, and, really turning down that noise for myself was a real turning point, of stepping back from like allowing all of that into me and saying, and taking it for what it was and kind of reconnecting with the type of person I am and who I want to be and who I really am with my kids. I'm not, it doesn't always connect, right? Who I am might look different than, what I'm seeing online coming at me. And that's totally fine. The things I like to do with my kids are great, and they're just as wonderful experiences, even though they might look different than what I'm seeing coming through the little squares or reels or whatever on my, while I scroll.
Oh, I'm sure everyone's found themselves there at some point. On some platform, like whether it's Pinterest, whether that's YouTube, we've all had kind of a reckoning moment of like, all right, all of this is telling me that I should be over here doing all these things. And what do I do with that information?
Yeah.
Like, what do I take from it as value? What do I leave? What do I buy? What do I not buy? And so like, what is your recommendation for, let's say a mom with a 2-year-old that's just kind of like getting into this whole world and is very overwhelmed?
I think to take stock of how you're feeling in terms of like social media, is that what you mean? I think taking stock of how it's actually impacting you is like the biggest thing. So I always recommend like doing a check-in, like what's motivating you to like tap the icon to get onto the app, right? And kind of sit with that for a second. Check in with yourself as you scroll, and check in with yourself when you log off or, exit the app, whatever, and really take stock of like, how has that impacted you? How is this session? Like, what have you gotten from that? Have you been lifted up? Do you feel wonderful? Do you feel like, you can take on the world? Or did you have a chance to laugh about, some funny animal video or whatever? Or did you leave feeling like with some shoulds in your mind? I should be different. I should be better. My kids should be better. They should be different. My relationship should be different. We should be doing things differently as a couple. If you're coming off with all of those like shoulds and feeling like you are just doing a terrible job, or you are just who you are is not good enough, you really need to like, I think, sit with that and say like, who am I following and where am I getting this messaging and why am I coming away with this kind of feeling? And really taking stock of who you're following, where these messages are coming from, and how helpful your, feed actually is to you, and taking some stock there.
Yeah, that's such good advice, because I think it ebbs and flows, because you can feel like you're in a really good headspace, and then all of a sudden, whether that's external situation, stress at home, following someone new, whatever it is, then it just kind of can like, hip check you over into a total insecure lane. And all of a sudden you're questioning all of your life decisions again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just having that like internal awareness as you are, and sitting with it and saying, muting accounts or unfollowing accounts as you need to. And this is something I do all the time. I spend time online, and being able to look back and say, last year I was going through a very difficult pregnancy, and seeing like happy pregnant people, I couldn't handle it. And that's me as like a therapist, and I should be able to kind of like deal with that or kind of like sort it all out, but I couldn't in that time. I really need to kind of unfollow like certain accounts with like newborns, and I need to follow, accounts of like happy pregnant people or cute maternity outfits, as I was like, raging sick 24 hours a day, and because it just wasn't good for my, headspace at that time. Yeah. And I can go through and like kind of unmute people or take them back in, now a year later. But I think just giving yourself the grace and the permission to say, I can do this for now if I need it.
Yeah. That just adding that temporary for now, or even today, or even right now. Like 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time. Yeah. It's okay. You have that permission.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah, so refreshing. And to know that like, even influencers, people who are on the app, I'm sure a lot struggle with that, I'm sure is maybe even surprising to hear, because you'd think that, you just have it all locked down.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. I think that there is that misconception that people are not humans sometimes, and I think we hear that a lot in terms of like, messages that people get, and like people commenting on people's like influencers' children or things like that. They are actually people on the other side, and who are humans, just like parents are humans, and people struggle with all sorts of things, Yeah. We're all learning how to get through life. We're all doing it for the first time, right? So, and especially living a life on an app or on, in such a formal or visible way, I should say.
Right. On a public platform like that. Yeah. And I know you have created some resources now about like screen awareness and being able to work on those habits. So can you talk a little bit more about some of those resources or things that you're doing now yourself with that?
Yeah. So last year around, probably around this time, I had kind of like this awakening in terms of how I wanted to have my relationship be with my phone. And I was doing something on my phone. I think I was already like posting a caption or something wasn't working on like Instagram. Like it was so important. And my son was asking me a question. I was like, not right now. Like you like have to, I lost my patience with him or whatever. And he looked at me. He was 7 years old, I think at the time. And he's like, Instagram is not important. I'm important. And I was like, you are correct. Like it was this moment where I could have like shouted back at him something like, this is important. This is my like job. This is how I make money. But he was correct. And I allowed that moment and I said, you're right. And I put it down. I walked away and I like didn't touch it. And from that point forward, I was like, I need to make a change if I'm going to lose my patience. And if my 7-year-old can sit here and tell me like Instagram's not important, and I know that is true. So I was like, I need to make some changes. And, a big part of my background is working in the field of addiction. I spent a long time working in like substance use disorders and detoxes in residential facilities and inpatient facilities. And so I took a lot of like what I knew from that addiction side of my learning, and I kind of set myself off on a path, and I was like, I am going to get down my screen time. I am not going to sacrifice hours of my day anymore to being online. It's just not that important to me at this point in time. And I need to make some changes so I can be more present in my life with my kids and for my own mental health, that I'm not going to be yelling at anyone when they interrupt my Instagram time, which, seems so ridiculous, right? So I developed a path for myself forward. I used this kind of what I knew about addiction, what I knew about screens, what I knew about all sorts of stuff. And I think I brought it down to like 77% less screen time than it had been previously. Just by doing kind of some simple, like just little habit changes, how I organize my phone, how I, something called planned leisure. So how I spent my free time so that every time I had free time, I wasn't just like picking up my phone and scrolling Instagram or, Facebook for nothing. I wasn't doing anything on there,
Mm-hmm.
So really just developed some kind of simple habits, simple tricks, and just a new way of approaching how I use my phone. And it made a huge difference. And since that time, I've done, I want to say like 4 or 5 rotations of the challenge. And I'm about to actually open it up again, probably in the next few weeks, and do like a pre-summer one. I'm trying to do it like 4 or 5 times a year at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get people kind of, thinking about it and making some steps to have a healthier relationship with their phone. And not everyone's going to want to do that, but the messaging I've gotten back from thousands of people who have gone through the challenge is that people want to have a different relationship with their phone and feeling more present in their lives, and are noticing kind of the impact that it might be having on them in their mental health and well-being and their relationships with their family.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely am on board, especially with the summer is a great transition for some of that, habit change, because your kids are going to be around more, or there's just more things that you can do, or you're starting again to be more social, at least outdoors, with the pandemic. So being able to have more structure to set you up for that help, like the best intentions still don't get you to where you want to be.
Yeah, I think sometimes you just need a plan, because it's so easy to be like, I want to use my phone less, but like, what does that mean? And so what the challenge is a 14-day like kind of roadmap to getting people to where they want to be, kind of changing your mindset and becoming more aware of the tricks that are put on to us from kind of marketing companies and like the influencing world to keep us on our phones. And having a little bit of self-awareness around that, kind of looking behind the curtain, I think can kind of help us make those changes.
Yeah. So good. So this will come out June 7th. So will you have a challenge?
Yeah, it's going to still be open then. So I think I'm opening it. I can't remember the exact date, but it's on my calendar.
Okay.
So
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, no, I'll send you the link and everything. So it'll be opening up. Okay,
perfect. Perfect timing then. Yeah, so if that's you and you're ready to just get a little bit more support in that area to help set you up for success this summer, then we'll definitely connect you with your resources. So other than following you on Instagram, which I definitely need to do, any other ways to connect with you or your resources?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, of course, and I run my Over the Influence challenge. This is my phone challenge, and I have some other challenges in the works that'll be kind of releasing quarterly throughout the year. And I also have an Etsy store. I'm feel really passionate about people having mental health resources that they can use in everyday life. You know, I think there's so many resources out there on Instagram that are courses that are hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And, you know, I like the idea of getting back to like what I'm passionate about, which is what is using these resources that we have and including our mental health awareness and skills into everyday life. So I make like flashcards, I make worksheets and things for therapists, but also for parents to use as self-help. So that is another area where you can connect with me. And I also post on Facebook occasionally, but it's the same stuff that's on Instagram. So those are the places where I hang out, and that's it.
Nice. Yeah. So needed. So helpful. I'll make sure to have all those links in the show notes so listeners can go and download everything.
Perfect. Yeah.
So the question I ask every guest to wrap up is, how are you the mom that your kids need?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, you know, I like to view it as like we're all learning lessons from each other, and I'm here to learn lessons from them, and they're here to learn lessons from me within my imperfections and skills. And so I think that I truly believe that we're all made for each other. We were all put together for a reason. And that I think helps me get through it all. Like that we're all here to go through the ups and downs of one shared life together. And I'm exactly who they need, and they're exactly who I need. So that's what I like to remind myself, and I like to remind the parents I work with that too.
Yeah. Even your tag along third?
Yes, even we called them, my son, my 6-month-old was like, you know, an unexpected surprise, and my kids called him the mystery guest for my whole pregnancy, or as long as they knew about my pregnancy. But he is just like the most magical person. We literally all sit around and talk about how much we like love him and how amazing he is. Like, this kid's probably going to like step into the world and be like, where is everybody telling me how much they love me? Like, aren't I cute? Like, he's like probably never experienced any sort of like, you know, non-pleasant, interaction in his 6 months of life. So we joke about it all the time, but he is just like the most amazing thing. And my 2 older kids have been so good at welcoming him into our family and the world and taking such great care of him alongside of his parents. And, yeah, no, we just love him. He's the greatest thing ever. We just literally think he's just the greatest. So after a year or an entire pregnancy of like illness and like dread and fear, and, I was able to, you know, the second I met him, I'm like, oh, I like you. You're wonderful. Oh. I'm so glad you're here. Nice to meet you. So no, it's been great.
Oh, that's so good. I'm so glad. So he'll definitely fill out all of like the stereotypical check marks of like the sibling order of the baby of the family.
Oh yeah, no, he is like the total baby of the family, at least for now. We just think he's like, he's just this absolute beloved human, like has barely been put down in his whole life. And he just lives within the chaos of his 2 older siblings.
That's not a bad thing. Yeah.
No, I think he's learning great things. Life's a party, so you get to go everywhere. Get to go to swim classes, you know, all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah. Oh, so fun.
Nice.
Well, I'll let you get back to him. And thank you so much for taking the time and just for being able to share the wisdom that you've gained from all the things that moms have shared with you, but also your resources and just being able to share your story. It's so appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a great talk. I really enjoyed it.
Of course. Well, that was a fun conversation. I feel like we jumped around, but like got to all the important things, and she just casually dropped so much wisdom. Oh, I love doing this. This is so much fun. So if you stayed to the end, be sure to go follow at mom.brain.therapist on Instagram if you're there, and then also reduce your screen time with some of her resources and her challenge coming up Under the Influence. But it's so brilliant to just be able to support yourself with more of those resources if that's something that you're really wanting to do. So take a screenshot, of your phone right now, share that on your Instagram stories and let your friends know that this episode is here and out there and that you're finding value from the podcast. And if this is more than the first episode you listened to, go ahead and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It'd be so appreciated, and it allows other moms to find it. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.